Gospel according to St. Mark, the 7th chapter. Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre, and he entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syro-Phoenician origin, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay hands on him. And he took him aside in private and away from the crowd and put fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue and looked up to heaven, and he sighed and he said, "Ephatha," which means be opened. And immediately his ears were opened and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The Gospel of our Lord. Please be seated. Well, I need to just say I've been feeling a lot of pressure lately here at church, and you might think it might be just for everything gearing up for the fall, or whether pressure at home because now I got a baby coming again, but no, it's actually there's something in the air, and I don't know if you can feel it, that the momentum is shifting, the tide is turning. Do you realize that of the full-time pastoral staff here at Calvary, 2 of the 3 now have ponytails? I'm all right. I'm hanging in there. I'm holding my own. I'm not going to lie, some days it's easier than others, but we're going to get through this. So Jesus, in this gospel, he's trying to get away from all of that pressure, right? He's just trying to take let's call it a Labor Day weekend away at the beach at Tyre, right? He wants this few moments of quiet, and so up to this point, he's been telling everyone to keep quiet about this stuff. But somehow this woman hears tell that he's still around and comes looking for him. Now, why this secretive stuff? Scholars and pastors have been trying to figure out that for a long time. I can offer a couple of thoughts that I have on this. We don't know, but I do know that we have passages when Jesus grew from young age, saying that he grew in wisdom and stature and in divine favor. So I wonder if perhaps Jesus hadn't yet realized the full extent of what God is up to in the world. And perhaps Jesus has this human side that is growing, that is learning. And that's hopeful for me, because that means God seems to have a whole lot more of a human experience. God would have experiences like a growing and an understanding when my mind gets opened, and when I suddenly have a moment where a truth gets spoken in a way that I hadn't realized before, and my mind and my heart burst forth from this good news. Maybe Jesus knew that the inclusion of these Gentiles, that's in the 10-year master plan. We're only in year 1, right? So we're not quite there yet. Maybe that was somewhat of a surprise. But here's the other thing about that. Maybe there's this radical nature of the kingdom of God that surprised even Jesus, that keeps surprising me, keeps surprising you. And maybe we forget that we're supposed to sometimes be surprised about what's happening next. I even heard one theologian say that Jesus' encounter with this woman is Jesus getting caught with his compassion down, right? That Jesus had let down his guard, which seems to make a whole lot of sense because it's more than a test. It's not a test, I should say. There's nowhere else in the Gospel of Mark do you find Jesus test someone with his derogatory slurs. I think Jesus is letting his compassion guard down, and he gets a word of truth spoken to him. So where does this word of truth come from? It comes from this woman that for us then becomes this example of what faith can look like. Faith can look differently at different times. Faith can look like a quiet patience waiting for something to happen. Faith can look like a plodding along one day at a time. And faith can look like a fierce mother's protection of her child. So now we can see that faith looks like all these things, that it's not just one way, it's not just one size fits all, but with this woman, faith looks desperate for healing. So this story has been in my mind all week. And then I made a trip to the Day Resource Center this week. I was delivering the water that y'all brought in, and this was the second trip. After the ginormous trip from the 2 weeks before, I went down and took another 39 cases down. And I was talking with, and everybody comes out to help unload the truck, and they're so grateful. And I got to talking with one of the guys who works there and talking about, okay, what are your needs? What's going on? What's important to y'all right now? Day Resource Center is the day shelter for the homeless that we work with for Room in the Inn. And he said, well, Kyle, here's what we're seeing more and more. We're seeing come to our doors middle-aged women with children, homeless and looking for help. And my heart burst. Because his words for me were in that moment like this Syrophoenician woman coming on behalf of her child, and my heart grieved and burst, and I said, I want to do something. And somebody reminded me that now 3 major buildings that are being built right there are to house those same people. So when our heart bursts, things happen. And that's a truth that's not easy for me, or it's easy for me to be closed off to, rather. It's easy to not acknowledge the problem and the people who are desperate to try to escape it. It's a truth that I wasn't any more ready to hear that day than Jesus, I think, was ready to hear from this woman. And as hard as that is to hear, when it's spoken and the kingdom of God starts to burst forth, then suddenly we start to see and hear and we speak in new and renewed ways. Because then we know another person in a way we didn't before, as a person with a story, not just a statistic. And we know, they know, we all know together. That's the point. We're all on the same page with that promise of God that we are not alone. That we are brought together and closer in that moment because of that kingdom of God. When that bursts forth in this world, look what happens in the gospel. Jesus hears that truth from that woman, and it starts to set that good news in motion out there. And suddenly he meets another man, right? A man who is deaf and has an impediment in his speech. And Jesus touches him, and his ears are unstopped. His tongue is loosened. And this guy who is sick of the silence, I'm sure, in his life, Jesus says, don't tell anyone. Yeah, right. He can't help but share this good news message in the world. He's not going to be silent. It's easy for us to close our ears and our eyes. But who are the voices that you need to listen to today, this week, this month? When the Spirit speaks that truth, folks, we can't be silent anymore. We can't stay still. We have to do something. People will start to hear in new ways. And I think this is what Jesus gets a taste of, how quickly this thing starts growing and happening, that it's bigger than the one moment that he experiences. And the kingdom of God bursts forth in faith in places that we would never expect. And here's the thing about that, is that it looks communal. That it happens here. And that's what James describes, a faith that is alive in the community, a faith that is lived out by loving our neighbor, when we give care and consideration for the ones who are desperate. And it looks communal because we need each other, and we need to be in this together to do that mission and to give that care. And our faith is even being renewed by that mission when we start to think about the future and the others that will come to this place desperate for God's healing in the future. And we consider giving of ourselves for the sake of those others to come, because it's not about us. We have no way in this gospel to know whether this Syrophoenician woman really believed that she herself was worthy of Jesus' attention. She would have been happy for the crumbs from the table. But we know, and we can be certain from the reading, that she believed her daughter was worth every minute of Jesus' attention. And God gave the bread of life to everybody in the story. So it's not about us. But that's the good news that calls us to start to imagine a future where people will be filled and what that might look like. A future where people will come and be known and where people will be healed even in this place. And that calls us to live that hope right now in our present. Because God says we're all worth it. And this world is worth it. And God doesn't just offer crumbs, but God offers the bread of life here. So thanks be to God for that good news. Amen.